Hi, my name's Lachlan Wilmot and I'm the Strength and Power Coach here at the GWS Giants. Over the past 2 episodes of this season, what we've started to look at is how we can apply a lot of the principles in plyometric training that we've looked at and use them for the return to play or return to performance of your athlete. So it's really important to have a structured and systematic approach to progressing your athletes back into jumping and landing, and we've started to really look at how to introduce it into our Achilles and foot complex, then how we can start to use that absorption and get them good at landing. And now we're going to start to show how we can progress their concentric power or their ability to jump. So a really good way to start to progress this is we want to keep improving their ability to absorb or to land. So we want to start to challenge the height from which they come from when they're landing. So that would involve an altitude landing, which Maddie's going to show us how to do stepping off the box here. But by the same token and the same stage of progression, we can start to introduce them to the concentric portion or the jump or force production component. And a really good way to do that is with a simple box jump. So what you'll notice we're doing is we're doing a box jump for our force production and an altitude landing for our force absorption. But we're going to treat them as a separate component. We're going to let Maddie start to get used to producing force with very little landing forces, but then by the same token, get her good at absorbing force without having to produce much in the same exercise. So we're going to start today with looking at a simple box jump, some good cues, because it's often something that's done very poorly with a lot of athletes. What we're going to go through now is a basic box jump. A lot of people use box jumps, but in nature, it's a little bit more complex than what people try and make out. So you'll see in CrossFit, they do it a lot with repetitive box jumping. I can't stress enough that that type of box jump is very tough on the Achilles and increases the likelihood of an Achilles tendon rupture. So it's really important to treat the box jump as simply reducing landing forces. So obviously Maddie will jump to a specific height, and using this box, we're just going to decrease that landing force. It's a really good way to introduce concentric power or force production into an athlete because they don't need to have a huge landing force. They don't need to absorb that every time they jump. So the cues we're going to use for this are very similar to our tall to short landings in the positions and the way that Maddie uses her arms. So one of the biggest things that athletes find is they don't really know what to do with their arms when they jump. So it's really important to try and teach them at the beginning where the arms move and how to utilize the arms in correct landing and takeoff positions. So what you'll notice when a good jumper throws themselves forward is they utilize that arm structure. So you'll start to see the arms will follow the hips. So with Maddie, when her hips are forward, her arms are up. When her hips are back, her arms are back. And as she travels through each time, her arms and hips will track in the same motion. So when we're looking at the box jump angle and how to get up onto the box, we want to make sure that her landing angle is the same as her takeoff angle. So when she jumps, you'll notice it's a nice jump position. And when she lands, she's going to be in that very same position, just like we did with our tall to short landings. So Maddie, if you'd like to stand tall, get yourself ready. A nice simple demonstration. So arms up, absorb. Good. You can see here that Maddie's starting to utilize those angles that we talked about with our tall to short landings. Knees are out, arms are back, holding nice and strong. These knees aren't jarring forward, they're pushing out to absorb any of the pressure. Really important. Standing up, will work. You'll also notice that when Maddie gets off, she's not jumping off because it defeats the purpose. She's either stepping off, or if your athletes are at such a height, you may need to put some stepping boxes down so they can walk down. Because the idea is we're reducing the landing force. So now we're going to look at altitude landings, where Maddie's going to have a box height that she's going to step off and get that absorption going from a greater height. Now a lot of people start to look at and go, well, why don't you just jump up and then land in the same motion? We're running with the same premise of isolation, then integration, that we use a lot within any type of resilience or robustness programming. So what we've done is we've isolated the concentric part, got her good at the takeoff, and we're also now isolating the eccentric part, teaching her good absorption. Because when we start to combine them together, there's going to be more chance for error and more chance for injury. So what we're going to look at now is a nice steady step off, strong absorption, following all the same cues that we've looked at with our tall to short landings, but also our arm positioning with our takeoff. So Maddie, we're going to stand there, reach nice and tall, step and absorb. And you'll notice with this, when Maddie falls, it's an aggressive landing. She's actively pulling herself up into the landing. It's not waiting for the ground and then trying to absorb. She knows the ground's coming, so she's actively getting into position. And that means toe up, knee up a little bit, and throwing those arms back to get a good body position. Tall, bang, good, and stick, lovely, really good. So these two exercise progressions are really good to start to get our athletes back into jumping and force absorption. We've done an isolation of our concentric power, an isolation of our eccentric power, and then we're going to add them together in our next episode and look at how we can start to integrate both concentric and eccentric loading, and also the cues that we can start to use to make sure our athletes are progressing in a really sound, structured manner, pushing them forwards to their return to play.